Hi, this is Mark Agresti, and I'm going to read a chapter from my book, Tales from the Couch. Chapter 1, Life's Just Not Fair. I first met Gino when he was 14 years old. His story is imprinted in my mind, and he's actually a very painful one to talk about. The beginning of this story sounds like so many others, but sadly, in the end, I'd learned that Gino had some serious demons, as bad as they get. For now, we'll begin at the beginning. Gino came in with his mom, and as far as appearances go, I'd say he was a fairly typical teenager in dress and presentation. He looked sort of like a skater, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, but he was built strong and almost dangerous looking. When he first came in and I asked him about drug use, I was surprised when he admitted in front of his mom to using marijuana daily along with Xanny bars, which are 2 milligram alprazolam tablets that get their name for the rectangular bar shape. He referred to his using as getting barred out. He was drinking regularly as well as basically whenever he could get his hands on alcohol. He liked those tall beers and would drink for 4 to 6 of them at a time, however many he could get. Despite all his admissions, Gino's mom sat right beside him. She was almost pleading with me when she asked, "What am I going to do with him, doctor?" She said that Gino was gorked out of his mind on drugs at school and was having uncontrollable rages. He was smoking marijuana literally around the clock, and she said that there was a nervous and menacing energy about him. He looked like he could take care of himself physically. He was a little overweight and very muscular for his stated age. Even at 14 years old, he was already almost 6 feet tall and much stronger than most of his classmates. I was sure. I suspected that he was aware of his physicality and took advantage of it. With his rages, physical characteristics, tendencies to get into trouble, and propensity to use drugs and alcohol, I said to his mom, "I really think he needs to go away to treatment. There's no way we can manage all of this outpatient. It's just too problematic, being so close to his friends and being so familiar with his environment. Also, he needs to have a mind clear of drugs to even begin therapy." I also explained that I felt this way because I knew that he had a seizure a couple of weeks prior. This was from taking and abruptly stopping too many of the Xanny bars, all with alcohol. This combination can be a deadly one because people just stop breathing. I've lost a lot of patients who've mixed alprazolam and alcohol. The thought of him doing that on my watch frightened the hell out of me, so I felt strongly that an all-out of town treatment center without his circle of friends nearby was the best option for him, for many reasons. His mom agreed to sending him to an out-of-state inpatient treatment center. We found one in Utah, and he went there for a month. When he came back, I didn't see a change in him. Sure enough, within a week of his return, he was using again. His mother, desperate now, asking, what more could we possibly do? She was dealing with Gino's issues, in the process of divorcing a second husband and running a business by herself as well. Her plate was full, no doubt about it. I suggested to her that we needed to send Gino away again, but for a longer period of time. She was so stressed out by her divorce and his drinking and drugging that she was willing to try almost anything. So Gino went to another out-of-state inpatient treatment program in California, but this time for 6 months. Once Gino was safely out of town, his mom came to see me and give me more history, starting with, "There's more going on here than you know." To this day, I actually remember my stomach clenching and how physically sick I felt as she filled me in on all of Gino's history. She began with, "I've never really told anyone this, but now I'm seeing this. It's important for you to know." I thought to myself that this was not starting well. She continued, "I divorced Gino's father when Gino was 3 years old, and I asked what happened there with his father. She replied, first, I need you to know that I didn't know about any of this until Gino was about 10. I said that I understand that there were 7 years of divorce where she was in the dark about something obviously important with Gino and his father. She continued, well, when Gino was 10, I found out that he had been repeatedly molested by his father. His father would take showers with him, sleep with him in the same bed, and even repeatedly anally penetrate him. As she relayed this, the pain was etched on her face. I imagine that she felt that she had failed her son when he needed her most. Her next comment cemented that in my mind. She said, and I know something was wrong. Looking back, even when he was 5 and couldn't really verbalize it, on some level I knew. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, but every time he came back from a weekend with from his father's house, Gino was a different boy. He would be irritable, angry, and easily agitated. He would have explosive rages for no apparent reason. He would refuse to do anything, including go to school, take showers, and come to family dinner time. It would take me 3 or 4 days of comforting and reassuring him to get him back to baseline. She eventually knew exactly what was going on when Gino finally admitted it when he was 10. At that point, she immediately had his father arrested and put in jail. She said the biggest part of it is that even now, at age 14, Gino won't talk about the extent of his abuse. But I figure it went on for about 6 years, from about ages 4 to 10. Honestly, I was at a loss for words, which never happens to me. But what do you say to that? A mother is sitting across from a desk from you, detailing 6 years of very graphic sexual abuse of her son by her ex-husband, his own father. It's horrific, plain and simple. And Gino had never brought it up with me. He had a month of inpatient addiction treatment in Utah. He was just about to return from 6 months of even more intensive therapy and drug treatment in California, and there was nothing in the treatment center's notes about his speaking about it. I knew that we were going to have to explore this long, horrifying chapter of his life, one that I was sure he would rather forget about. I mean, any normal person would rather forget about that history than relive it by talking about it. But this level of trauma was the driving force behind all of his destructive behaviors, and it had to be dealt with. He couldn't take enough drugs to block the pain. You don't make drugs strong enough to block that kind of pain. Before long, Gino came back from California. Now he'd had 6 months of consecutive intensive treatment and clean time, and as a result was clear-minded enough for me to speak to him about deep issues. I broached the subject by just asking, Gino, your mother told me a little bit about what happened with your father. Do you want to talk about it? He simply said, yeah. And with that one word, he opened an emotional door that had been nailed shut for a long time. He said, it's the hardest thing in my life to deal with. I get nervous around people, even all these years later. He went on to say, my dad used to drink a lot, and then he would go in bed with me. I remember that smell, the smell of the alcohol coming out of his pores. To this day, I hate the smell, yet I drink. How screwed up is that? He continued, I get these really strong flashbacks, and for me, it's like it's really happening again. I get triggered by the smell of alcohol, the rhythmic sound of a fan, or the squeaky noise of a door. He used to get in the shower with me and abuse me. So showering almost scares me in a way, like I'm just waiting for someone to come in. I lock the bathroom door when I take a shower, even if I'm alone at home. The more I talked with Gino, the more he opened up. He said, other things are going on. Back then, it was happening to me. I used to pretend it wasn't me, that it was happening to someone else, and I would go into this dreamlike state like a trance. This is fairly commonplace with severely traumatic events. It's called depersonalization, which is a persistent feeling of observing oneself from outside their body or having a sense that one's surroundings are real. It can be a self-protective measure. Gino went on, but now it happens to me for no reason. I'll be talking to someone, just a regular conversation about normal things, and all of a sudden I'll go into this weird state where I'm not really there. I'm somewhere else. I said, Gino, these symptoms are normal and go hand in hand with other things. When he asked what those were, I explained a lot of people who have been traumatized like you get these flashbacks. There can be nightmares too, where smells, feelings, sounds, and images make people go right back to where they were. Gino confirmed that he was having all of these things, so I educated him about it, explaining, this is all part of post-traumatic stress disorder. The nightmares, the flashbacks, your inability to sleep, the jumpiness, the rages you're going into, and those outbursts you're having. All of these things are from post-traumatic stress. He then tells me, I don't know if it's because I'm off drugs, but I can't really enjoy anything. Nothing makes me happy. I feel polluted. I feel like there's no point in living. And like my life is doomed to be a total waste. I confirmed that this too was all part of post-traumatic stress. And I educated him more on the illness and how it causes mood swings, nightmares, flashbacks, and how people, places, things, and smells can trigger the physical and emotional feelings of actual abuse. I explained more about depersonalization syndrome, where he basically left his mind and body in order to survive the abuse, but that the problem now is that it's happening when he didn't want it to. He immediately said, exactly. I can't be with my friends doing whatever and something triggers me. I don't even know it. But then I sound like I'm a zombie. I don't know where I am. It could be for minutes or even a couple of hours, and my friends don't even know what to do with me. Sometimes I'm out the whole day, and all my friends can do is call my mom when I get like that, and she comes to get me. They're cool about it, but it's so freaking embarrassing. Like, who wants their mom to have to come get them because they're basically freaked out? It wasn't that long ago when my own son was Gino's age, and I couldn't imagine how difficult that would have been for him to be in a situation that Gino would find himself in. Being in such a state that his friends would have to call my wife to come get him. I said very genuinely, I'm really sorry to hear that, Gino. It sounds very painful. But he wasn't finished with the revelations. He told me there is something else really weird going on. So weird, I don't even know if I should bring it up. I'm afraid you'll think I'm crazy. It took some assurance that there was nothing he could tell me that would make me think less of him or think he was crazy or beyond help. I spent a fair amount of time convincing parents of these exact things, and I won't think they're weird or crazy, or that I won't just give up on them when I hear why they're there to see me. In my 30 years, there isn't much I haven't heard or seen. Patients often have a hard time leaving this, and many walk in the door assuming that they're beyond help. In fact, this is generally a self-esteem issue that isn't true. Gino tells me, I have these times where I'm talking to people and I look at my arms and legs and they get bigger and smaller, like I'm actually see them shrink and swell. Or sometimes I'm talking to people from 3 feet away, but then they look tiny, like they're like a mile away. And then there are other things that's happening, that I have these random feelings when I'm talking to my mom or to my friends. I feel like they're going to attack me or that they're thinking bad thoughts about me, and the thoughts are hard to forget about or put them in the back of my mind. When that happens, I immediately shut down. It's so disturbing. All I can do is stare at the floor. I get so upset that I can't be around people at all. This is derealization, is often found with depersonalization. Gino's perception of the world had been so deeply affected that it seemed unreal to him. I explained that depersonalization and derealization, post-traumatic stress disorder, and abuse were all tied together and would affect his entire world. He said, yeah, this stuff is messing me up. Is messing up everything. I can't talk to people because I feel so nervous around them. I can't get close to anyone, even my family, and it puts distance between me and everyone else. It's so disturbing, and it's been this way for a long time. It's starting to get to the point where I don't even know who I am anymore. Gino's self-esteem, sexuality, well-being, and ability to form satisfying relationships was destroyed by the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father. By this point, Gino had been out of the 6-month California treatment center for about 6 months, so he was supposedly clean and sober for 1 year. He was seeing me regularly every 2 weeks and more often when needed. I had him on the antidepressant bupropion XL, 300 milligrams in the morning. Not only did that help with depression, but it also helped with the weight problem he was developing. because he was comfort eating in an effort to make the pain go away. Food is an important factor in many sexual abuse cases. In addition to comfort eating, some people actually eat in deliberate attempt to gain weight. They do this as a defense mechanism so that they will be less attractive to keep people away. He was also getting almost psychotic symptoms, like he was in and out of reality. He couldn't sleep and was getting severe agitation, so I was giving him very high doses of an antipsychotic, quetiapine, 1,200 milligrams at night, and I was giving him triliptal for mood swings as well. He required massive doses of medication because of his excessive smoking and long-term drug use caused him to metabolize drugs very quickly. There was an urgent need to control his agitation because I was concerned he might injure someone during a rage. He had no ability to control his rage urges. More than 6 months on the meds seemed to be helping Gino a little. He was at least sleeping and functioning pretty normally. I always hesitate to use the word normal because it can mean different things for different people. Despite his outward appearances, Gino was still struggling with depersonalization, derealization, and post-traumatic stress syndromes. School had pretty much gone out the window, but Gino had developed a friendship with a neighbor who had a boat building business, so Gino spent time there and was learning how to build and repair boats. It was good to see him developing skills that he would be able to use to possibly support himself later. Gino was a saga patient, meaning that I planned on following him for a long time. I have many patients who I see consistently every month, or even more often, for many years of their lives. Oftentimes, I may see a patient for years and not see them back at all. Or sometimes, after not seeing them for a long time, they come back to see me for the same or different reasons. Everyone has different needs, but I suspected that I would follow Gino in some form or fashion for many years. As for his drug and alcohol use, he was on and off that as well. That was just one of his demons that Gino had to battle. There were times when Gino would go away for treatment, then he would be back again. This happened for years of his life, but I kept up with him and kept him on the bupropion, quetiapine, and oxcarbazepine. I also added clonazepam 0.2 milligrams to help him with severe anxiety. The meds just settled him enough to allow us to really attempt therapy to try and deal with his abuse. But to put it mildly, it was an uphill battle. During therapy, I was trying to help him deal with issues by focusing on the here and now. When he experienced these flashbacks and out-of-body experiences, I wanted him to focus on his breathing or something that was actually happening around him at the time, like a flag waving in the wind or a car driving by. It had been about 5 years since he has first come to see me. Gino was no longer a 14-year-old kid. He was now a 19-year-old man. It was worth noting here, too, that Gino's mom was still right by his side. She was distraught, drained, and worried sick, but she was there. To be honest, there were times when I worried about her mental health as well. No one can watch helplessly as a loved one, much less their child, struggles with a personal psychological hell and feel nothing, at least not for someone with any human empathy. But I had to set these concerns aside for now in order to direct all my efforts to Gino. Even with all the meds and the therapy, Gino's mental illness persisted. The manifestations became more dangerous as he grew physically. He would rage, scaring everyone around him. At 19, he had a serious incident. He took a sledgehammer to a car just because the car reminded him of his father. He literally destroyed the car. He denied doing any hardcore drugs at the time, so it wasn't drug-fueled rage. He did admit again to smoking marijuana pretty much around the clock at the time. This was a war I was sure I wouldn't win, so I told Gino that if he was going to smoke, to at least continue to take the meds too. With that, we came to an understanding and an uneasy truce, and his mom was aboard and supportive with it as well. I felt like there was no fighting it, and that it was possibly that the marijuana could be helpful. It decreased the signs and symptom of his post-traumatic stress and made the unbearable at least somewhat bearable. I saw Gino in the office consistently for years, though at the lows we even spoke frequently on weekends. If he was having a difficult time, during therapy we would focus on the rage, I'm talking about it without acting on it. Throughout the years, he continually battled his addiction, going off and on hardcore opiates. He spent more time off drugs than on, had a few serious overdoses, and several more long term inpatient treatment stays. It's so hard to get someone who was so horribly abused to not be angry, to not place blame, to not have rages. Gino's life was one of constant suffering, pain, derealization, depersonalization, and post traumatic stress. The meds were barely holding him. We would regularly have these long marathon sessions, trying to get him to focus and stay in reality. Forming relationships and being around a lot of people was impossible for him. He wanted a fresh start where no one knew him. He had been training with his neighbor to learn to build and repair boats and eventually decided he wanted to move to Louisiana to try that. To be honest, I had mixed feelings about the move, but I agreed to continue to follow him on FaceTime. So Gino moved to a place on a bayou and built a little business working on boats. We would do FaceTime sessions and he would continue to have depersonalization, derealization periods where he would totally detach from people. His depression would get really bad, and as always, he was always smoking marijuana. He was always having periods of time where he would play with strong opiates. At that time, I felt the need to make it very clear that he needed to stop messing around with the opiates. I told him, Gino, you've had 3 overdoses, and at this point, you need to be very careful. You're treading a fine line, and if you keep it up, you're going to end up dead one day. He really couldn't argue with this truth, so he didn't. As the years passed, Gino managed to put some clean time together, at least clean for him, which meant he was drinking and smoking marijuana daily, but he'd gotten off the opiates. For Gino, this was success. He had a job and a place to live, though his daily life was a struggle. In his late 20s, he managed to meet a woman and have 2 children. Unfortunately, she couldn't deal with Gino's demons. His mind was chaotic, the house was chaotic, the marriage was chaotic, and the kids were chaotic. It wasn't destined to last, and it didn't. She took the kids and moved to South Carolina. Gino didn't know how to be a father, much less a long-distance one, so after the divorce, he essentially wasn't one. But through it all, his mom was there for him, and I was. Even though he lived hundreds of miles away, they still spoke regularly and helped support him financially too. I spoke with her as well as support him. I spoke with her as well, something he had given me permission to do years before. He and I spoke regularly, at least on a monthly basis. All these years later, he was still taking the meds, drinking his beer, and smoking his weed. After he divorced, he settled in what he called a lonely little bayou and fixed boats to pay bills. When we would FaceTime, it was a sad affair for me. He was still having the depersonalization, derealization episodes where he had these periods of zombie-like states, or he'd be talking to someone and his body features would suddenly become distorted, or he would think they were talking about him or that he was planning to attack him. The flashbacks, the nightmares continues, and his rages went on. All these things that brought him to my office as a teenager were still holding him hostage in his 30s. It was frustrating to me, and it was, I could only imagine, was how hard it must have been for him. He got to the point where he really couldn't mix and mingle with society. It was all he could do just to deal with his customers and clients. If for some reason he was in Florida visiting his mom, I'd see him in person, but I mainly followed Gino on FaceTime. There were so many times when he was in crisis that I have to talk him off the ledge. Day and night, re-experiencing the flashbacks of being sexually abused tormented him. He would wake up in the middle of the night with the smell of his father anally penetrating him. He would tell me it was horrific and it was disgusting and I can't feel whole again. I always feel dirty, corrupted, and repulsed. And every time I hear or see certain everyday things, I go right back. The sound of the shower, the rhythmic noise of the fan, the smell of alcohol, and the creaking sound of the door opening, they all take me back to a place where it was real as it was when it was happening back then. Even just being in a shower or having sex with a woman, it would take me right back. Doc, there are so many days where I honestly don't know if I can take it anymore. or if I can go on like this. What could I say to that? He was 38, and he's been my patient for 24 years. Despite being trained otherwise in medical school, I'd become invested in Gino as a patient. He tried so hard for so many years. All I could say was, Gino, you've got to hang in there. You have to find the good things in life, the reasons to live. The next day I called his mom. She said, he seems to be making it, but I just don't know, doctor. He tells me that he's had some days where he's so bad that he doesn't get dressed, he doesn't open the blinds, and all he does is turn on the TV for background noise and smoke weed. And I'm so far away from him that I can't just pop in to check on him. To make sure he's eating and doing all the things that people have to do daily, I could hear the regret in her voice and reassured her that she could always call me if she needed to talk. One day, about a week later, I got a phone call from a small coroner's office in Louisiana. They informed me that Gino was found dead in the yard under a boat. It was so sad. I answered all their questions, and right after hanging up with them, I immediately called his mom to ask what happened. She told me that all they really found was methadone in his system. I guess that he relapsed after being clean for years, and that's exactly what killed him. Gino had relapsed taking one small dose of methadone. His tolerance was low because he'd been clean off opiates for years, so that one small relapse dose of methadone was all it took. Methadone lasts for 24 hours, and it just shuts down your ability to breathe. I think he was working, and he took the methadone, and he just wanted to take a nap. He laid down in the shade under the boat, stopped breathing, and died. I think of Gino to this day. He never had a fair start, and no matter how many medications, how much treatment, or how much love his mother gave him, sometimes too much trauma is just too much. It was a sad story, and it lives on for his mother and for me as well. I see other cases just as horrific in their own ways, and I've learned that sometimes you just can't fix people. Sometimes life's just not fair. That's the end of that chapter. All my chapters are based on real people, and everything in this book happened to someone. Nothing you will read in my book is made up. Everything happened to someone. So if you want to buy this book, you can go on Amazon.com, type in my name, Mark Agresti, M.D., and you can buy book Tales from the Couch. Just sitting here reading that chapter to you, chills went down my spine, because I tried to block out what happened to Gino, but now that just made me think about it again, and it's not a good feeling. But there are chapters which are more upbeat, and the book is based on virtually every major every major psychiatric illness. And there are 31 of them with an intro, which is one, so there are 32. And it's designed to, if you read it, to be a course in psychiatry. Thank you.